So I dropped you off and I got back on the highway. Now, about, I don't know, about 3/4 of the way through Connecticut, my check engine, my gas light went on. And I looked at the GPS and it said we had 35 miles to go to get back to our office in Providence. And I had 40 miles of gas, give or take, right? So I was like, all right. So I dropped you off, and my car, and a lot of cars do this, after 30 miles, it just says low. It doesn't tell you how many miles you have left. So I dropped you off. I'm driving. I'm like, I'm going to hit the gas station on the way home. Literally 2 exits before the gas station, my car runs out of gas. And
John, you're too old for that to be happening.
What's funny about that is, like, I'm hitting the gas pedal and I'm like, car's not accelerating. So I pulled over, and luckily I have AAA and they will deliver you gas. So I utilized that. No. It's free. It's included in your membership. So I utilized that option of my plan.
That's too funny.
Felt really dumb. Hey, there's a hum coming from you, Steven.
Really?
Yeah. Like
whenever you talk, your microphone's like unplugged a little bit or something.
Yeah.
Similar thing happened to me a few years ago. The reason being that I thought that I was on the miles until you're empty screen, and I was actually on the miles you've driven screen. And so in my head, I was like, well, I have 40 miles. And then fortunately, I was like on a residential street. So my car just died in the middle of an intersection. It's like, okay, I'll just push this little Ford Focus into a parking spot somewhere. And lo and behold, I'm out of gas.
I thought it was really interesting that my car ran out of gas. My engine stayed on, but the accelerator literally just did not do anything. And then the RPMs went, like, the engine stopped, like, I don't know. It stopped.
It's probably bad for the engine to run out of gas. Newer cars probably have something that.
Yeah, it totally does. It's still happening. Oh, it's happening really bad.
I can't. I don't know what it is.
It is ultra robotic. Yeah.
So it definitely has like some sort of like self-preservation feature, because the engine stayed on, and I was able to pull over to the side of the road because I was going like 60, so I had some speed going there, but like it literally just it dropped the RPMs to 0. Like, it shut off all of the like engine mechanics that would make the car drive, and it just like sat there idling.
Can you hear me now?
I've never run out of gas, but my mom did once when we were driving home from somewhere, and she was she pulled over and she was able to turn the car back on because I guess it just settled, and then she drove another like 3 miles. That's not any better. And then she sent 4 of my brothers and sisters at the time were in the car, and they were all very young. I think I was like 10. She sent me. We stopped like 2 blocks from a small town police station, like right next door to the town we lived in. I walked to the police station and begged them for a ride. They were super angry, but
really? Their motto is protect and serve.
Yeah, they shoved me in the back of the car, and then they brought me to where I told them my house was, and I was like, no, not this town, the next town. And they were so angry when they realized that they had to drive more than 2 blocks.
Is this any different?
No, it's like way worse.
It's about the same, but they drove. It was like 3 miles, like not even 3 miles. Like, those towns were very close to each other. They drove me. Luckily, I got there like 10 minutes before my dad left for work, and so otherwise we were in a long walk back. It was like 10:30 at night or something.
Yeah, so I felt pretty dumb. Moral of the story: I felt pretty dumb.
I have no idea what it is.
It's really bad.
Maybe just restart Zoom.
Yeah, maybe. I'll try that. Oh boy.
why would I just do it myself? Why not use AAA?
Just any different?
That's pretty much where I get. Yeah, it's gone. I can't hear you though.
Well,
It's gone.
Yeah,
But
there's
what do you
no
mean?
sound.
How is it gone if you can't hear
That'll
me?
fix the audio problem.
You feel free to keep talking,
Yeah.
but we can't hear you.
So it's not. You don't know if it's gone.
yeah.
Keep talking if you can hear us.
I think he's probably saying bad words at this point.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys are total assholes.
Oh man, it's hilarious because when he wasn't on the line, me.
Well, John says it's gone, but I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Hey.
No, it is gone though.
Well, it was gone.
It's gone, but I
lips-
can't hear you.
Your lips were moving, and it was gone. But
Brilliant.
it is gone now.
Well, it was gone when you first came on too, the first time. So it came
All
in.
right.
I think.
Oh,
when
so
you hit
we should
record.
give it a few minutes.
Let me just
Well.
see if I can't get. Sorry, we're running late here. See if I can't see. I got the everything recording. I think we're good now. Let me open up the show notes. Hey, David.
Hey, Steven, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I hear you. Great. So, can you guys do an audio check, everybody?
Sure. Test,
John?
Test. How's this?
That's Nick. You're probably a little hot as usual. John, go ahead.
I'm here.
John, turn yours up a couple of notches.
Turn mine up a couple of notches.
Yep, always.
Let me go into my system preferences.
Nick, you again?
I just lost all sound.
Yep, can't hear you. You're coming out of something different now. Lost your mic.
1 second. I can't
Oh,
hear anything.
now you're back.
Can you guys still hear me at least?
Yep, gotcha. Sounds fine.
Hello?
Interesting. My
Yes,
game
Yeah.
is
You
good.
can hear me? I
Yes.
can't hear you. 1
we
second.
can hear you.
I think it's actually Zoom. Hold on a second. Now, my input volume is literally as high as it will go.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
On both Zoom and my on my computer. Input is pegged.
Oh boy, we're running late here.
FYI, in preparing some of this information in the document that I'm looking at right now,
Yep.
I also have a few browser tabs to share at some point, including the Alexa Developer Console and implementation of a module, and
Let me
maybe the Alexa
rejoin.
module
I
code.
changed
Nick, be quiet.
my input. I didn't change anything on the output.
Hey, Nick.
Can you hear us, Nick?
He can't
I
hear
don't
us.
think he can hear
Oh.
us.
Shh. Nick, be quiet. Go ahead, David.
I just wanted to share that. So I noticed that Talking Drupal is both a podcast and a video presentation. So that might be helpful for viewers to actually see what a skill looks like, how it's actually implemented in Amazon's interface. And then the other side of it being the Drupal module, which is actually pretty light.
So that would be awesome if we could do that in a reasonable way, but we can't easily do that right now. I can't switch. We're not prepared. So this is our second video show actually in a couple of years. So I can do our talking heads, but to share your screen and make it visible to people would be difficult.
Oh, you're recording from Zoom, right?
Not really.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it's not. It's so. Let's actually try this. So go to share your screen. We actually haven't tried
I'm
this.
about to try it. Yep.
Yeah,
So
share your
here's-
screen.
This is the screen I would be sharing.
Yeah. So let me go back here and see how that looks, because this is actually getting recorded in another piece of software. So let me see how we can make that work, because that could be interesting. We need to keep in mind that it's audio first. So doing too much demo doesn't help us much.
Right. I wouldn't actually. I was thinking about that too. I don't want to spend too much time focused on the
Right.
screen itself or walking through any sort of technical stuff. But we are going to be talking shortly about some technical elements when I discuss the difference between skills, intents, intent slots, and slot types.
Yep.
If I could put that up on the screen at the same time, that could be helpful.
So keep your screen right where it is right now. And I'm going to try something. I'm going to create another layout.
I can hear you guys again.
Good.
Could you so you couldn't hear us telling you to be quiet?
I saw somebody putting their finger in front of their lips.
The international sign for shush.
For some reason, when I adjusted the input volume, it changed which monitor on my headset it was outputting to. That looks like a Lego head.
This?
No, the add-on that you were clicking on in Chrome.
Oh, yeah. I know what you mean. The Great Suspender.
Yeah.
Does kind of look like a Lego head. I think it's supposed to be a button that you turn on and off.
Oh, I see. So, David, what's your Twitch channel going to be about?
So I'm going to be hosting a 12-week Drupal training for site builders from 0 to 60 with Drupal. In 12 weeks, we're going to have about 4 hours a week on Saturdays with some follow-up homework in the weeks between. I'm going to have some specific assignments for that. Also going to set up a Discord or a Slack channel, probably a Slack channel inside of the official Drupal.org Slack group to be able to answer any questions and also let the community sort of talk through things. This is the same training that I've been giving through Acquia for like the last 5 years. We call it a jump start. I'm not going to use that language. All the materials, like I'm recreating all the materials because it's really just a very rote process of how you walk through Drupal if you don't know anything about Drupal whatsoever.
What's the
and then it'll get you to. I am currently the Neon Lobster, but I'm going to be setting that up as Drupal Dave. And I do make a mention to DrupalDave.com, which is currently crashed because it's an instance of Modic. And guess who doesn't know that much about Modic? But I'll have that fixed by the end of the day.
All right. Could you jump back to turning your screen share off?
Sure.
Oh, this is. I think this is going to work. Let me see if I can get this adjusted a little bit.
Like anything we do, it could work spectacularly or fail just as spectacularly.
Is it Neon Lobster or the Neon Lobster?
The Neon Lobster, not just any Neon Lobster.
I think it's fun. I think Drupal Dave is hilarious because it just reminds me of Drupal Dev. The play on words is ingenious.
It's not my idea, actually. I was working with a customer many years ago in Boston, and we were doing the training thing. He was like, oh, you should do this yourself. It's DrupalDave.com. And like 4 years later, I'm finally doing it. But I've owned the domain since he originally gave me the idea.
All right, we're going to try this one more time. So hang on 1 second. If you could switch, wait 1 more second. Switch back to your screen share.
Sure thing. Cool.
Yeah. So.
I was gonna say, if we're gonna announce it, you better create it, or that will you.
Yeah, I've been on the internet for a couple of years now. I know how things work.
You can't use the same email address for 2 different accounts.
Oh, can't I?
Well, that's technically the same email address.
Yeah, but they don't know any better.
Yeah.
All right, so we can't try. We're not gonna be able to do the screen share too gracefully here. I didn't prepare for that, so it doesn't come out that good without too much work. So we shouldn't go there.
Don't go to the screen
share.
Yeah,
we shouldn't go to the screen share.
Okay, let's not.
Yeah. So if you could turn that off, and let me adjust this back. Yeah, that works.
Dr. Disrespect. Thought he was banned.
Oh, they get banned and they come back like all the time.
I was like, who is Dr.
That's like how Twitch
Disrespect?
works. Like that's like you strategically get banned unless like, you're a professional, in which case that's not going to help your career. But if you just play video games all day long, who cares about the fact that you abuse your wife?
Oh,
that's my understanding of this. Dr. Disrespect. That was my understanding.
Does he
of
really?
why
I had no idea that's what he got banned for, like filming in a public bathroom at TwitchCon or something.
I think there was that too. They're
Hey,
characters.
we're recording now.
Okay.
All right. So, what time constraints do we have? Because we're running a little over right now.
I don't have any personally.
With 2 p.m., but I could probably push that a little bit.
Okay, so we'll try to be concise. We get two choices. One is, if Dave, you have a time constraint, we could record the second half of the show first, or we could, if you're good for 60 minutes, we could just run from the top right through.
Yeah, I'm good with just 60 minutes.
All right, so let's go. We'll just go straight through the show then, guys. It'll be a little easier to edit too. I am recording video and I'm recording audio. So whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'm starting, right? Yes. Okay, I did read through the notes, but I didn't know if that changed. Okay, ready? This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of guys with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 235, Voice Integration. Hello, everybody. I'm Nick Laughlin, and joining me today is Stephen Cross and John Picozzi. In this episode, we have David Platek joining us to talk about voice integration with Drupal. This is a very interesting topic for all of us and new information for most of us. Before we talk with David, what's new with you, John?
Well, I went to Drupal Camp, New Jersey this past weekend, which was fun. Had a good time down in New Jersey, and got to experience a new camp, which was awesome. And just been so coming out of that camp, I had dinner after Friday night after the camp. Stephen and I, actually, I should say, had dinner with Jacob Rockowitz, the maintainer of web forms, for anybody that may not know that. And we were talking, I went to his talk at the camp, and we were talking about donation forms with web forms. So over the weekend, I was like, I'm going to try this out. So I got a dev instance of Drupal running. I installed web forms, and I think it was called the Stripe web form module, and like literally was able to get like a donation form up and running in about an hour once I figured everything out. And that was super cool to me. It's pretty simple. It's a pretty basic use case, but it just seems very cool that I was able to get it working and like see the API calls back and forth from Stripe to my site and all that stuff within a very short period of time.
It's pretty cool.
And you said you used the Stripe contrib module for that?
It was the web forms module and then Stripe web forms, which is not to be confused with web forms Stripe, two separate modules. Confusing, I know. Welcome to Drupal. And then that relies on or has a dependency of the Stripe module.
Sounds cool. And how about you, Stephen? It sounds like you went to New Jersey as well. What's new with you?
I did. It was fun to have a road trip with John. John, you didn't tell your story about your drive back, but I guess we could save that for another time.
Yeah, we don't have to share that with people.
Okay. So New Jersey Drupal camp was fun. Had a good time, had a good trip. It was great. I also, we did our render of the first recording of the show last week, put it up on YouTube, so you can check out our YouTube channel. The interesting piece for me was the new computer I put together did the render of the final video in 8 minutes versus about 45 or 50 minutes when we had done it a few years ago. So it was a great improvement there in terms of post-production time. So We're off to a good start here. So this is our second video recording. So we'll see if this goes almost as smoothly. Hope it does. Nick, what's going on with you?
Not too much. This weekend or towards the end of last week, my boiler started acting up. My furnace started acting up, and it keeps faulting on a temperature differential sensor. So I had I put in a call to a company, and it's so funny how similar troubleshooting is in different industries. So, one of the reasons why I called somebody is, heat in the house is important. It's a gas appliance. I thought it'd be good to have a professional out there take a look at it. Guy comes in, he's nice enough, sits down, and literally just calls the manufacturer to ask them what to do, and starts Googling the furnace, model number. Like, okay, how do I check the outlet sensor? And like,
I could have done that.
Like, come on. and then he goes, yep, the sensor's probably bad. And then he goes to like pull the Molex connector out, and one of the wires comes out, and he goes, oh, look at that, one of the wires was loose, maybe that's it. And so he put it back in, and he's like, yeah, we can order the sensor, maybe. I don't think any supply houses probably have it, and we can replace it. So long story short, if that loose wire doesn't fix it, I may attempt replacing the sensor myself, because it's not like he followed any fancy troubleshooting steps or had any fancy tools. He just used a multimeter in Google. So
right,
I can handle that, I think. And if I get out of my depth, I can call somebody up. So maybe
it's pretty amazing how many household things you can solve with YouTube these days.
Yeah, I mean, the furnace made me a little bit more nervous.
Sure.
Because, it's the heat and all that. But, one of the things I actually did on the home automation front is I moved one of my cameras downstairs pointing at the display, because I got sick of running downstairs to see if it actually was out or if I was just cold. So I could just pull it up on my phone and see if it was actually out. But yeah, I mean, it I understand what the service that they provide, and, I'm not complaining that, they're charging for the service. I called them out, but it's kind of amazing to me how similar that process is to, what I do on a day-to-day basis. Whenever there's a bug, the first thing I do, if it's not something I've seen before, is Google it, which I'd already Googled, this issue. So I was kind of surprised to see the tech doing that. So that's kind of where, what I've been thinking about this weekend.
Kind of concerns me. I would never want to be a tech in Nick's house, because I feel like you would just be sitting over my shoulder watching everything that I was doing. Be like, okay, can I get
Wait, you don't watch the techs when they're at your house? You don't want to learn what they're doing?
I literally, like, anytime, like, guy comes over, guy comes to clean the furnace, like, electrician, plumber, whatever, I'm like, you do what you got to do. I'll be upstairs, like, doing what I got to do.
Oh, not me.
Let me know when you're good. With that said, my father-in-law's a contractor, so, I get a lot of real life hands-on experience working with him and hanging out with his friends. So, if I'm calling somebody in, typically it's because I can't do it myself.
Hey, we've got a story this week that I just wanted to go through quick. It's a blog post from Mobomo's website, and it says the top 10 Drupal websites. I wanted to bring this up because I don't know if these are sites that are written in Drupal and they've picked these as their top 10 for some reason. But it's always interesting to me when I see a list of sites that are in Drupal that I wasn't aware of. I'm not sure if you guys were aware of all these. Some of them, like the first one they have listed here is Tesla. That's a Drupal website. And then they've got Mint. They've got Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. They got the National Baseball Hall of Fame. The Australian government.
I was aware of a couple of them. I was interested to see the list. I knew Tesla and Mint were. I knew Australia.gov was. I didn't know that the Emmys and NASA were. That kind of surprised me, but I think it's pretty cool. I think these kinds of lists are sometimes a bit arbitrary, but it's always good to publicize kind of what kind of big sites are using a particular technology. I think that's
Yeah, it's not particularly interesting that these are the top 10, but it's interesting to see national brands and some bigger websites running Drupal and you're not aware of it. So the link is in the show notes. Go check it out. And if you have any, do you guys have any on your head that aren't in this list?
I'd like to note that the Australian government doesn't just run their website off of Drupal. They actually have a distribution that various parts of their government uses for spinning up their websites. So the government itself invested in, I don't recall the name of the platform itself, but it's just a multi-site distribution. And they are rolling it out, or were rolling it out for all of their various agencies and departments and whatnot, however the Australian government operates that way.
Very cool. I mean, there's a lot of government, branches and departments that are using it. I mean, I have it on pretty good authority that the ATF is on Drupal. If you listen to it,
I heard something about that.
233 or 232. But yeah, there's, it's always surprising sometimes to see like, oh, that's, looking at a site like that and wondering how I would solve those particular problems or, get a particular theme working in a certain way. I think it's always cool to sometimes dig through, other projects that are using the technology.
When we were at the New Jersey camp over the weekend, I was talking to someone who's working for the state of New York. And he said to me, there's lots of agencies in New York that are using Drupal to run the state, DMV, etc. Lots of things. So it's always interesting to hear that stuff.
Very cool. This week, you have heard him, but we have not introduced him yet. As I mentioned, we have a guest. We are talking about voice integration. So we asked David to join us as he has some expertise in Alexa. David stumbled into Drupal in 2007 in Berkeley, California, which eventually took him to Washington, D.C. in 2012 as the senior developer for President Obama's administration, working on whitehouse.gov and the We the People petitions application. Since 2014, he has enjoyed the privilege of working with nearly 100 customers, facing a plentitude of challenges as technical consultant and architect at Acquia.
Safe to say, David, you've been around the block.
Uh-oh, your audio is back, Stephen.
Yeah, your audio just...
That's fine. It's I think it's recording fine on my side.
Okay.
So if you can tolerate it.
It's okay. Yeah, we can try. And if it gets worse, then maybe we can adjust. Okay. So David, is there anything else you'd like to highlight?
I would like to mention that later this month on February 22nd, which will be a Saturday, I'll be starting a 12-week free Drupal training program on Twitch, available at twitch.tv/DrupalDave.
Awesome. I will check that out.
So I got one question right off the bat, and I know many listeners are going to wonder about this, but so you worked on whitehouse.gov. Did you ever get to meet President Obama?
I did. Yeah, I have a photo with him, actually.
Okay, that's awesome.
I missed an opportunity to meet his wife, though, which was really sad. All my coworkers are sending me pictures while they're taking pictures with her, and like, oh, you're in California, haha. But meeting the president was a very exciting opportunity.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, and I mean, I've certainly been on the petition site to look at it. I think that's a pretty cool project. I don't know how many petitions actually got through. But I think being able to have a voice and having some place to look at that is useful anyway.
The technology. I mean, I was there for the technology. Sure, the ability to communicate with your government through the internet is interesting and potentially novel. But really, the technology behind the petitions application in particular was fascinating. It started as a Mongo project with a Drupal 7 front end, and then we converted that to a full Drupal backend system using a custom API in the process. It was a great couple of years.
Okay, very good. And for our primary topic this week, I almost said this year, I think it might be a topic coming up for people in the next couple of years. But our primary topic this week is voice integration with Drupal and specifically Alexa. So when we're looking at voice control, there's kind of two or three big names in the field of voice control. We've got Alexa with Amazon, and Google has, I don't know what they call their assistant. I mean, it's just, hey, Google. And of course, we've got Siri with Apple. It looks like Alexa, there are more than 100 million Alexa connected devices currently in people's homes, and more than 100,000 skills in Alexa, in the Alexa skills store. Can you maybe talk to our listeners a little bit about what a skill is and what that means?
So an Alexa skill is kind of like an app, right? So you can go to your Amazon store and you can add skills to your Alexa account, which will allow you to summon that skill by saying something along the lines of, "Hey Alexa, ask Beer Buddy what's the latest beer at my local pub." And if Beer Buddy is an Alexa skill that somebody created, and it was able to check against the database of beers at your local pub, Alexa would return the response, "Hey, here's the latest stout that you can go if you go downstairs."
And anybody that is listening to this show with that skill enabled, we may have just enabled your Alexa. So we apologize for that.
Yeah, you should, by the way, you should mute your Alexa devices during this show, or it will be activated many, many times, I'm sure. So who's providing those skills? So generally, if you're a user of Alexa, you can pull in those skills, integrate them with things through kind of an easy to use interface. But it's my understanding that developers are the ones actually building the back ends of those skills and require a little bit more technical expertise, correct?
Correct. Well, the skill development itself is done through a user interface that Amazon provides. It's a little clunky, like most Amazon interfaces. And that'll allow you to actually create the intent to create the, what do they call it? Excuse me here. So you create the intents, those are the actual utterances themselves that allow you to say, Alexa, what beers can I get at X pub? Alexa then processes that information. It hears that you have spoken a specific intent, which was, what beers can I get at? Which might be different from what new beers are available, or which might be different from what wines are available. And those would be three different intents that Alexa then adds a slot to. The slot would be your local bar or your local winery, et cetera, in those instances.
So we should probably back up for a second and quickly give an overview of voice assistants. Many people think of voice assistant, you just ask a question and it just magically knows the answer. But you've mentioned a couple of things already that have specific meanings in the space. So a voice assistant is comprised of usually 3 or 4 components. One of those components is obviously a microphone. So you need some sort of input to receive the communication. Then there's language processing, which is basically taking your speech and converting it to text. And that's kind of where the 3 companies that I mentioned really are kind of miles ahead of most competitors. They're able to understand accents in some cases, other languages, and then they convert that to text. An intent is taking that text and working through it to determine what is being asked, because you can say, you can ask for the same thing in multiple ways. You could say, "Hey, I'm hot right now, cool it down a little bit." And, that intent is basically saying, "Hey, turn the thermostat down." You could also say, "Hey, set the thermostat to 24 degrees or turn on the AC." And, those 3, while they're very different terms that you're using, they're all intending to achieve a very similar thing. And then finally is what Amazon calls slots, but the action that should be taken or the input. So you might say a more simple one might be, what's 2 times 2? The intent is multiplication essentially, and then the slot is the actual numbers that you're inputting, and then the result is whatever the answer is. And so those are the 4 or 5 kind of sections to a voice assistant, I think.
Correct. I'd agree with that. When it comes to the intents, if you create custom intents, you're responsible for sort of iterating over all of the different phrases that you might expect a user to state in order to summon your invocation, right? So this would be, like you said, it's too cold in here, or can you turn the temperature up, or it'd be nice if it were warmer. Amazon doesn't figure that out for you. Through the user interface, you would actually be responsible for providing all of the sample utterances that your application will support. And you can also provide some responses that Alexa will provide if it doesn't understand the question provided to it. So if it thinks that it thinks that you're talking about the invocation related to warming up the room, it will respond with, are you asking me to change the temperature in the room? What temperature would you like me to set it to? And that would be your opportunity to respond with the slot, which is, I would like it to be 70 degrees. And the 70 degrees is the thing that Alexa is listening to. Those are the custom intents. Alexa also provides a lot of out of the box intents. So you can do things, go ahead and pull some of these up actually. Some of these are, you can ask about various books that are already out there, since Amazon has that huge database. You can ask questions about what movies are playing in your local area. You can ask questions about concerts that are playing in the local area, what the weather here is, that sort of stuff. And you can build those intents into a larger application that involves more intents in your Alexa skill.
So, David, obviously you're super focused on Alexa and working with Alexa, and I was just curious why start off with Alexa as opposed to Google or Siri or one of those other assistants. Was there something that drew you towards the Amazon platform as opposed to those others?
It's probably just availability. I was one of the early adopters of the unit itself. So I already had one in my house. I didn't buy any of the other vendors' options. I was working at Acqui at the time when we were developing a proof of concept around a grocery store and a recipe system at home that you could follow along with. Which led to the development of the Alexa Drupal module itself. And so out of curiosity, I just started building out some Alexa skills on an application that I was playing with at the time. So I didn't really have a specific reason to pick Alexa over any other, aside from the fact that it was there for me. I would probably point out that when it comes to Siri, there is no real ease of entrance there. You still need to compile a iOS app or a watch app or one of those things. Which is going to set that barrier significantly higher than what Amazon Alexa offers. Amazon Alexa is mostly configured through their interface, and then all of the backend logic, which we'll talk about later, that gets processed through the Drupal module. So Amazon hears you invoke an intent, and here's your slot that passes that along as a post to your Drupal instance, and Drupal figures out what to do with that. So since the module was there, I just simply used it.
Interesting. So, I mean, can we expand upon that a little bit? And can you give us an idea of what can be done with Alexa and Drupal?
Sure. So at the time that I was implementing Alexa skills, I was interested in integrating third-party data sources into a Drupal application. This came from working with several universities that needed to build out a staff profile system. And it turned out to be the exact same system over and over again, which is effectively just like a Guzzle client that is making a request to a third party, retrieving some sort of response, ideally JSON, and then outputting that inside of a twig template in Drupal. But now they want to start editorializing, right? So you don't just want that original piece of information, you want an adjusted piece of information. So I was toying around with third-party data anyways, and decided to go ahead and point a Alexa skill at my Drupal site to editorialize some third-party data sources, such as Untapped, to figure out what beers are available at your local bar, which is why that example was available earlier. And also, what is the value of a specific cryptocurrency right now, or what is the value of an existing cryptocurrency in the past? And those, I think, served as really good examples of what you can do with Drupal and with Alexa, because Drupal was just acting as a pass-through layer here. I could have written something in Ruby and hosted it somewhere else, but for me, I just like to use Drupal, and I wanted to see what Drupal could do with Alexa without building out a large content store myself. Feasibly, though, you could hook into anything that Drupal stores. So you could make requests about what was last time an article was posted to this website regarding a certain tag, and Drupal could receive that information. It could parse through all of the content on the site that uses a specific taxonomy term, the specific vocabulary, and spit back all of the information to the end user. You could do things like ask, what is the status of my shipment? And if you have an account on a website running Drupal, could very easily pull that information up for you and say, hey, we're packaging the shipment today and it should be sent out tomorrow.
So is it fair to say, and this is like pretty high level, and feel free to correct me if I'm wildly off base, but is it fair to say that, with Alexa and Drupal, right? Alexa is almost like an audible interface to an API, right? Where Drupal's providing you with like a JSON API or some sort of API to tie into. Alexa's taking that audio, and then the skill is manipulating the audio into a query, getting the data from Drupal, and then spitting it back out to the person again via audio.
Exactly. So just to rephrase that, Alexa posts a JSON object to your Drupal endpoint. Drupal receives that object, processes it accordingly, whatever that might be from backend logic, and then Drupal is responsible for providing the utterance that is returned. So Drupal would then say, the latest beer at this bar is XYZ, and it came in yesterday at 6 p.m., so the keg might still be very full, that kind of thing.
So does Alexa provide things like user context? Like, obviously it's going to give you the intent, but do you also get like, hey, this was this particular device and it's probably this person? Or do you not get that level of fidelity with those?
So I did a little more research. Sorry to interrupt there. I did a little more research into this topic in preparation of this podcast. Sorry, that's my dog. He really wants attention right now. So my understanding is that you do get some useful analytics around unique users. I do not know if you can actually get anybody's Amazon information right now. That would be really helpful, though. It would allow you to create more personalized experiences.
Speaking of that, one of the concerns that a lot of people have with voice assistants in general is privacy. The hardware generally has a specialized onboard chip that's listening just for the wake word. So, they're not always recording. They're just essentially listening to a 3-second loop. And when they hear the wake word, they just record from that point on, including the 3-second loop that they was currently in memory when it heard the wake word. And then it listens for a short period of time, and then does the processing that it needs to do to determine what was actually said, and then what intents need to be executed. So I guess, speaking as somebody who has one in their house and has developed for the platform, do you have concerns around privacy when you're looking at these types of devices?
I'm extremely concerned about privacy in the 21st century, regardless of these devices. I think that this is just one small sample of technology that we need to be taking very seriously when it comes to invasion into our homes. You mentioned earlier, is it possible to identify a user on an Alexa device? Is it possible to figure out that they're a specific person? What happens when you begin integrating those tracking devices with other systems like Facebook tracking and Twitter tracking? It then becomes possible to figure out when somebody is leaving their home, when somebody is a mile from their home. There are definitely some concerns there. There's a lot of resources out there for people who want to be more concerned about that. I would correct real quick. One of the things that you mentioned, it's not that the device is constantly listening on a 3-second loop. It's that only when it hears the wake word does that 3-second loop get triggered. Yeah. And then at the end of that 3-second loop, that 3 seconds gets sent off to whatever service is being the provider. And then if it can confirm that yes, the wake word was triggered, it then either processes whatever was heard in that 3 seconds, which sometimes is enough to get the intent rolling, or it then says, I heard you, and then repeats the question that Alexa would offer if it did not know, if it did not understand your question. So it's not listening all the time. It is listening for your wake word. If it hears the wake word, it will get sent off to a separate system. There have been stories about those saved audio files leaking out here and there. I don't think that that's unique to any other privacy consideration people have in this day and age. I do think that the larger considerations are just across the board when it comes to adopting technology, and that people should be a little more concerned with their privacy. In fact, if I can like drop a video that somebody should watch, a gentleman named Ollie Thorne just released a video called Data on YouTube under the channel PhilosophyTube, which is a great way of sort of asking questions around the impacts that all this data harvesting is going to have in our lives.
So I think we could probably do like a whole episode on privacy with devices that are listening to you. And the different schools of thought and the different conspiracy theories. But bring it back to Alexa and Drupal specifically, I just wanted to clear something up. We had talked about Alexa skills and there being a UI to create them, as well as the different parts of those skills. Is there a complementary, and you may have already said this, I may have missed it, but is there a complementary coding language that goes along with Alexa skills, or is it like strictly just UI based, kind of development?
To my knowledge, it's all done directly within the UI. There's a couple of bits of code that you need to export or import at one point. But if I recall correctly, it's just formatted JSON that Alexa knows how to make sense of.
So if you're integrating this with one of your projects, do you need to create a skill for each website each website you're installing the Alexa module on?
Yeah, because each skill is going to have a different endpoint.
Okay.
And that's just wherever we're going to be posting the data to. Now, right off the top of my head, you could create some sort of like let's call it a balancer. And so a third party, some layer in front of all of your websites could receive that initial request and then disseminate it accordingly and allow, in a round robin fashion, some website to respond. But it would really just depend on your use case, if that makes any sense.
Do you feel like that's limiting as far as like the skill that you're creating and like how you're interacting with Drupal? Or let me rephrase the question. Have you ever been limited by the UI of the skill creation mechanism?
Not really, but that's only because they're only giving you access to so many features, and the realm of voice control is already extremely limiting. It puts you back into those days of like Zork, where you don't have very many tools available to you anymore. You only have language, which means you can't communicate through any sort of imagery. You can't communicate through any sort of timed experience through imagery, some sort of sequential art. And so since you don't have that, you sort of have to rethink what your experiences are in the first place, which is why Alexa skills aren't really like a go-to for many websites, because what would your website necessarily do? It sort of needs to provide some sort of functionality. Games are very popular. Checking local information is very popular. Sports are very popular. But what would you, just have a blog? What would you use that blog for in regards to an intent? Stores could definitely use this to, integrate with a system that allows customers to say, hey, what's new at this store? And then they can rattle off all the latest sales or something like that. Super useful there. I do want to mention, since I devalued news and blogs on the Alexa platform, the Flash briefing system is a separate API that they offer. And so that would be a great place to integrate your stories, to offer people the opportunity to subscribe to your website's news in the same way that they might subscribe to CNN or NPR through the Flash. And if you're unfamiliar with the Flash briefing system, it allows you, a user of Alexa, to basically define a number of news providers. And every day you can ask for your Flash briefing, and Alexa, with her robot voice, or his robot voice, if that's what you choose to use, will step through all of the day's news.
It's super interesting because as you're talking about like what Alexa can do and what can be done with Alexa, I am like having visuals of the Super Bowl commercial going through my head with like, hey, what did we do before Alexa? And they're just like asking for, just that, the weather, the news, tell me a joke, that sort of thing. So we talked a little bit about what can be done with Alexa and Drupal, but are there any projects or other examples that you would like to share?
Well, I know that Georgia.gov used Alexa. Georgia.gov did a big Drupal rebuild a few years ago. One of their big functional elements that they wanted to show off was their ability to sort of what's the word here? Interact with the website itself through a organic search platform that allows people to just ask questions, and then Georgia.gov sort of figures out what you intended to ask and then provides information back that's relevant to you. And they integrated that system, which was built in Drupal, with Alexa. And so that's pretty fascinating to be able to say like, hey, Alexa, ask Georgia.gov, what's the deadline to get registered to vote? Or ask Georgia.gov, what's snow day schedule this year, if snow is a thing that they get in Georgia. So that's pretty interesting, being able to interact with sort of chatbots, or not really a chatbot, but just like a repository of existing information that is sort of contextualized and made relevant based on the questions that you're asking, and then returned to you through a device when you might otherwise be incapacitated. You might have a roof fall on you and you need to say, hey, what's the phone number to the Georgia police station or fire station? And then Alexa will answer that for you. Much more convenient.
So let's say that I've come up with a use case that I think is good for a good use for users of Alexa and good for the users of my website, like a unique integration that's going to be helpful. Maybe it's a local news blog, like you mentioned. What's a good way to get started with maybe building my first skills?
Well, the first thing you would need to do, same with building a website, figuring out how you want users to use it. Give me 1 second to deal with this guy.
Yeah, that's fine. Steven, you want to see if your audio's...
How do I sound?
Really bad.
Robotic.
Is it strange, huh?
I mean, if you think it's on the recording, fine.
It's not on the record. I don't think it's coming on the recording.
I think that's fine. I think it's fine to jump in. It's just really, it's bad on our end. But if it's fine on the recording,
can you understand me?
Not easily.
Not easily.
Then
but
don't worry about it.
Okay, I brought out all the strong bribery tools. Anyways, what was the question again? I'm sorry.
What's a good way to get started? Well, let's give it a pause for a second, and then. So let's say that we. Oh, yep.
While we're doing this, let me get this in here. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. So let's say that I've come up with kind of the perfect integration for users of Alexa and my website. What's a good way to get started? What's a good way to kind of build my first skill and test that?
Well, the first thing that you need to do is think about how users are going to interact with your skill. So you have a good idea, like, maybe you want to make up a game that allows people to play tag using Alexa, and a Drupal backend that allows you to interact with friends. So Drupal manages who your friends are through some integration layer. And now you can play tag with them through Alexa. If that's your idea, the first thing you need to do is start thinking about how users are actually going to use that skill. And this goes back to our conversation around intents and slots. So you need to have an understanding of all the different ways that a user might ask to do something, like, Alexa, which one of my friends is online right now? Or Alexa, who's online right now? Or Alexa, is anyone I know online right now? You would need to define all three of those intents first before then building out the interaction model with Drupal itself. So and this is very similar to how we build out websites, right? You want to have a very good understanding of how you expect users to interact with the underlying data, how you want to expose that underlying data in a visually appealing way. And then you begin the process of planning how to implement that. So step one, have a very good understanding of how your users are going to interact with it, and be ready to test it with all of your friends, because they're the ones that are going to sort of be pushing all those edge cases and asking phrases that you've never thought about before. And it's really easy through the UI to just add those intents in. So as you use the Amazon user interface to build out your entire Alexa skill, they walk through the entire process. They provide a lot of documentation. They've heavily incentivized developers to build on this platform. So they've made it as easy as possible in that regard on the Amazon end. The Drupal end gets a little more complicated.
So but before we get to the Drupal end, I think I have a couple of other Amazon site questions. One of them is it possible? So I imagine that you do everything you can, like you said, to come up with all the possible ways of asking. And so speaking of the tag example, you might say who's online, or who can I see, who's near me, that kind of stuff. Is it easy for you to see failed intents?
Yes.
So that
yes, they do make that easy.
Okay. And do you get can other people utilize your skill once it's made public? Like, so if somebody says, hey, I like this tagging mechanism, just anybody can add it? And do you get some sort of recognition, I guess, if you get like 1 million people have added your skill, or is it just kind of you build it for yourself and only you can use it?
So I think that there might be two questions here. First is the skill itself. So once you publish the skill, it's available on the Amazon Alexa skill store, just like you would find an app on the App Store. Okay. I don't know what the vetting process for that is, if there is one. But you can publish that skill, and then people can install it on their Amazon Alexa devices, their various Alexa devices that are supported. And they can begin utilizing it immediately, which would mean that they're using the intents and the slots that you programmed yourself through the Alexa UI, and they're connecting to your Drupal backend or whatever backend you want. So yes, people can just use that skill day one. You can advertise it, etc. Let's see, private skills. So this question around private skills. I don't know about that. I don't know if you can do private skills. I know that you can do unpublished skills, which work the same as published skills. So like my 3 skills, I've never published them, but if I reinstantiated the Drupal application that supports them, I would be able to use them just like I could use any other. That's kind of like putting stuff in the developer zone of the Apple OS integrations. But there's another question that was there that I want to answer, and that's the intents themselves. So you've taken the time to write out all the possible phrases and questions that users can ask. You've provided all the synonyms. You've created all the possible intents, or all the possible slots, the variables themselves, and all of their variables. Can you share that with somebody else? And the answer is no. Those are yours and yours alone. I think that you can export them so that they can be imported into other Alexa skills.
Okay.
But you can't share them. There is no like intents library that allows you as a developer to share the skills that you've built so that other people can use those pieces in their larger systems. But Amazon is constantly rolling out new default skills and intents, or not skills, intents and slots. So as I mentioned before, there's already a bunch of built-in intents around questions regarding books or movies or local information. So you can leverage those in your existing skills, but you can't push yours into those libraries.
So as we get started here, developing our skill and our Drupal integration, what can somebody that's venturing out on this path for the first time expect as a challenge or something that they may have to overcome?
Well, it's a bit of a learning curve since it's very new technology. I mean, you're working with a UI that's provided by Amazon. Those are always a little bit kludgy. You're working with a whole new concept of data interaction. So instead of putting something on a screen or putting something inside of a JSON object somewhere, you're now talking to people, and that's a bit of a hurdle. The module itself isn't the Drupal module that supports Alexa. Still works, but it hasn't been updated in a couple of years, which means some of the new features that are available in Alexa right now, like the display functionality, so you can take things beyond just repeating with the voice, but actually providing some imagery along with that response. That isn't built into Drupal yet. But the module itself, very well documented. There's an example module built right into it that you can follow along pretty easily to provide your responses. There's a hello world example in there. So and the instructions were very easy to follow for myself the first time I installed that hello world module. It was just simply a matter of reading the documentation that Amazon provides, following along with that documentation to create that initial skill, and then installing that module in an existing Drupal site. And that was really it. So it was actually really approachable.
So does that module just provide an event to subscribe to react on?
Exactly. Okay. Yep.
So before we close, one other question around testing. I'm assuming you have an Amazon Alexa to test this with. Is that a requirement, or does Amazon give you kind of like a test environment that you can use?
Not only is it not a requirement, there's a user interface that you can use. You can test speech, you can test text. So if you're having issues speaking, or you can't speak, and you still want to be able to build out these skills, you can test them in a little console that they provide for you. Also, they're very generous with their developer relations programs. So they're constantly running contests of one sort or another, and they're generally giving away like 10,000 Alexa devices every single time they do that. So all you really need to do is like launch a skill, and they'll send you something. Not that I have any experience doing that because I never actually published the skill, but they're out there, and they're very interested in getting people to use the system because they're using all of these skills, or using all these interactions to build out their natural language processing systems. So kind of like how Google is using CAPTCHA to handle all their AI visual recognition systems, Amazon is using this to handle their language processing systems. So they want you to get users to use the system so that they can process all of those words, and they will send you free stuff. And if you actually get people using the skills, they'll also pay you for that traffic eventually.
Okay, so if you've gotten nothing else from the podcast, create a skill, get a free Alexa. There you go.
Well, this was very interesting to me. Longtime listeners of the show will know that I am a huge fan of home automation, and one big part of home automation in a lot of people's houses is voice integration. I personally do not have any voice assistants in my house, mostly due to privacy concerns. But it is a topic that I follow closely, looking for open source options. And so before I wrap, I just want to mention the one that I've been looking at recently is called Almond, and it is from Stanford. And supposedly it's a little rough around the edges, but serviceable. And I think there's also I'm not sure if it's open source or not, but Mycroft, I think, is another option that is privacy focused. So I'll make sure I put links to both of those in the show notes. So David, thank you for joining us. I very much appreciate all of your experience here. It's something that I've worked with Amazon a lot. I've looked at some of their natural language services, but I've not looked at building any Alexa skills. It's something that I was definitely interested in. And so it's good to have you on the show with some firsthand experience. Do you have anything that you would like to tell us about, and how can listeners reach you?
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to talk about something that's as fun as Alexa skills integrating with Drupal. I'm always interested in new things to do with Drupal. And speaking of new things to do with Drupal, again, I'll mention my free 12-week training over Twitch, which is going to begin on Saturday, February 22nd. Learn to be a Drupal site builder, learn a little bit about something about theming, and then depending on the success of this, I'll also move into a developer cycle afterwards. So that's available at twitch.tv/DrupalDave. I'm otherwise available everywhere on the internet as The Neon Lobster. Not just a Neon Lobster, but The Neon Lobster. And so if you want to get a hold of me on Twitter or Instagram or something like that, that's where I am.
And David, who is your furry friend?
Oh, this is Finnegan. Hold on, we can get him to do this. Just 1 second. There you go. Come here, buddy. Oh, come on. There you go. This is Finnegan.
Oh, that's a big boy. Oh my God.
He's a big boy, and he desperately wants to go outside because he's been cooped up for the last couple of hours.
All right.
Go ahead
Well,
and take them out.
with that said, we'll get to the end of the show, and you can do that. If you are a listener and you have any questions or feedback, you can reach out to us on Twitter at Talking Drupal or email us at show@talkingdrupal.com. You can get show updates by signing up for our newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter. We'd also like to thank our patrons for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated, and you can learn more about that at talkingdrupal.com by choosing the Become a Patron link in the sidebar.
Thank you again for joining us, David. And John, how can listeners reach you?
You can find me on all the major social networks at John Picozzi. You can find out about Umfink at umfink.com.
And Stephen, how about you? Stephen can be reached at Stephen Cross with a PH. and listeners can reach me at Nixvan, NICXVAN, pretty much everywhere.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Thanks again for having me, everybody. Take care.
And Stephen will be editing himself back into that later, I'm sure.
He's going to dub himself.
Yeah, we do a lot of dubbing sometimes.
All right, great.
All right.
So I sound like crap still, huh?
It sounds like a loose wire almost, or like a failing microphone.
Don't know what it is. It could be loose something. It's weird.
Or like a microwave is going on in the background, because sometimes that interferes. But
nope.
I can't imagine you've had a microwave for an hour.
No, there's nothing going on here.
All right, I got to take my dog out. He really wants it.
Okay.
Thanks,
Dave. Thanks again. I will follow up with you
Nice.
guys. And yeah, this has been great. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Cool. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Anything else, guys?
All right. I got to get some lunch. I'll talk to you guys later.
All right, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Talk later. Bye.